What's up, everybody? Shooting my shot today to go live in lieu of Paul Vanderklay. It's absence. I've got an echo here. Not very professional. Uh, because I have my phone going here. I don't know how to turn this off. And still, okay. Trying something new here, so bear with me. Weird. Still got the echo out there? Let me know. I don't think it's my phone audio, actually. So shooting my shot today to go live in lieu of Paul's absence. Shoes honestly too big to feel. I had a podcast need to reschedule, so I had some space open up. So with a bit of quick rearranging and some mini Photoshop, I came up with a few ideas to hit on. Not introducing anybody here except myself, so I may as well just get on with this show. So without any further delay, Christian Baxter, yours truly, live today. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to yours truly, a place we go to think out loud. So, what is up, friends in the chat, in the YouTube and Twitter world? Yes, I am doing my best to save people from withdrawal, though I am but a lowly uh, YouTuber in this world. But in the corner of this little corner of the internet, I thought, in the spirit of play, let's have some fun. So, thanks for the feedback on the audio. It was the audio from my phone. Actually, I was hearing just it was playing my voice through my phone, feeding back a little bit. But, anyways, so I don't have a Discord. I don't have a way to garner questions to build up to Friday morning live stream questions, but we could see what's out there in the hive mind and play along. I've got my virtually not alone bubble up here in the corner with me. Play along. So, anyways, I thought, Paul Vanderklay, who usually does a Friday morning live stream here in this little corner of the internet, he is hosting a micro conference at his sister's, I don't know, bread and breakfast, Airbnb. Um, and uh, and I guess there's probably 12 to 15 people out there with him. Some of the people I think that are out there: Michael Sartori, Mark Parker, Hive Mind. Who else is out there? Do y'all know that's with Paul out and somewhere around Jersey? I think New Jersey. I could be wrong. It's in the Northeast. I know that much. Having his micro estuary conference. It'll be interesting to hear about what that was like, how that's been as he continues to kind of step out into the world of organizing on the ground. Yeah, I know he's been mentioning having conferences at at Living Stones, so it'll be interesting. Yeah, Teo might jump in, but he's grabbing some lunch right now. All right, here's a question from Samuel Ewing. Who has been your favorite or most surprising interview? So I guess you're talking about for me. Um, I think Flevis has something I don't even know. Yeah, but we'll get there. Off the top of my head, honestly, one of the coolest. Well, I've had some kind of. I'll put it into two categories because I'm kind of developing these two rails for the podcast conversation where it's you have like the randos, like the TLC rando side, and then you kind of have like the heavy hitters, the players, the status, and that whole side. And um, I had some of my most interesting conversations have been with people that barely hang out in the corner, um, do some maybe, but I had a really great connection, like through the screen with a guy named Bryce Carlisle. We were talking, he's a Presbyterian who became a Baptist, but he's been on Grail Country a few times. And we were talking about like our kids getting baptized, and it actually was it was just like a cool connection. And then I had another one with well, these random things that like the Chinese rando Bob, I was sitting there talking to, well, he was in LA, or not LA, but he was on the West Coast at the time, but he's from China. And he's sitting here listening over the past couple of years to Paul and to all these people. And I think Neil Daedalus made the point that when he went over and did some travel this summer I think in South Korea and in Japan, how the monoculture is the monoculture like everywhere. And I recently had a conversation with a rando from Greece, who met Tom Holland, and he on the stream, like he told me in our interview that he became a Christian in Greece listening to Paul Vanderklay one day on the internet. So that'll be interesting. That'll come out probably next week. So that's a long answer to your question, Sam. But some of the bigger interviews, like I actually didn't feel like my interview with Paul went really well. So hopefully we'll get another stab at that in the future. It was, I don't know, but like the intensity of my first conversation with Jordan Hall was overwhelming. And then I really liked how I got connected to James Taylor Foreman. He's not like in the corner, but he was reading and listening to all the same people. And he's a writer, and it was I've had 2 conversations with him. And then my recent, my most watched, streamed podcast was with Benjamin Boyce, somewhat controversial figure in these here spaces, as he talks about a lot of the culture war stuff. And that was really good for me because it was me getting open and honest in a way about some things politically or culturally that can be kind of scary to talk about in the open. So, Phlebas, I have no idea. Did you ever read Josh Ryan Butler's Beautiful Union? How God's vision for sex points us to the good, unlocks the true, and sort of explains everything. No, but that is sounding familiar now. I had a second conversation with Ross Bird, and he has a Substack called Patient Kingdom, and that'll be coming out soon. We just recorded it yesterday. But in that conversation, we really go into, he wrote a Substack on his article about the Carl Lentz, the Hillsong, New York pastor who fell from grace, as the things say. And we talked about pastors and infidelity, related to sex and such things. So might make some connection, because it feels like, well, here's the point on this. It feels like when that breach of trust happens, it's a massive intersection between the propositional and the perspective and the experiential, like all these things hit, and trust and betrayal. Ideas aren't just ideas. They're like now in people, and your doctrines of sin and grace are now like represented in people and relationships deeply when the people we trust with our spiritual leadership betray that trust. So that would be kind of sort of explaining everything. All right. Yeah. PBK sleepover. Oh. If anyone tunes in from the PBK retreat, they're in the Losers Club. Yeah, if you're out there and you're watching, let us know. Someone might be even talking about this. They're in the middle of estuary and someone's scrolling on their phone. Let's see. Boyce is controversial. You go look at his playlist and make that decision for yourself. He just had on yesterday, and this was one of the points I was wanting to get to, is this guy that went on Tucker Carlson, and Konstantin Kisin from Trigonometry just like went ballistic about Tucker having on this guy who he thinks is soft on fascism. You could say something like that. And so there's this whole conversation of people that are, not left and progressive, but you have the classic liberals, and then you have like the real conservatives, and then you have the people that are further right and all this stuff. And he's just sniffing up, barking up trees that, he's had conversations about the war war in Iraq, the war in Israel and Palestine, and all that stuff. So those are topics of conversation that I think are controversial. Maybe he's not, but that would be your opinion. I have no idea. Y'all should get on the Doer Discord that Weeks invited me on to chat. Let's see, Sam. Another question. Well, this is fun. We have real questions. Who are CCM artists you like, especially in the last decade? P.S. We'll cede the floor now. Okay. Um, I've been a Hillsong United fan for a long time. I covered a lot of their music at like camps and on the road, and they were a huge influence. Like Joel Houston's writing, Brooke Fraser's writing related to all of that. It's kind of old school now. I don't like most of the songs that I like from quote unquote worship and CCM are all about 4 years old now. Like I don't really keep up with what's coming out now. Um, and yeah, I know me and Teo, like we are huge fanboys. Um, and I agree with you. Let's see, go back to the question. CCM artists, the decade. So that's within the decade. They kind of dropped off after the controversy, even related to like Lentz and just even the Brian Houston as the pastor of Hillsong came under, and so they have now really elevated the women in that ministry, like Brooke Fraser and Taya, and they're kind of pushing them because culturally it's just it's a tough place out there for the dudes, rightly or wrongly so. So, but uh, yeah, that I actually like some of the Elevation stuff, but it's like their stuff from like almost 10 years now. Like there's a lot of I like the rock stuff when you have like a rock ensemble doing um the music. I really like that. Uh I'll say this, there's a Christmas to Joseph's point down here, Christmas songs on their best. There's one of my favorite albums was put out by, I guess it's Sovereign Grace, and people can get up in arms about theology, but they have an excellent Christmas album that I used at church and I've used even in my little home church, like these songs. It's man, I'd have to look up the album name, but they have a Christmas album. It's like 4, 5, 6 years old, and it is beautiful. It's wonderful. They kind of I love that album. We use it a lot. So I would say that okay, now that my brain is turning on, Andrew Peterson is a songwriter. His work has been massively impactful throughout the story of my adult life, prophetic even. An early song of his called Canaan Bound. Me and my wife recorded and sang at our wedding, and then his he has an album called The Dark Before the Dawn or something like that, and that was instrumental in healing in my life after major personal tragedy. So that's to answer that question. Let's see. David Busatil, what puck band's conversion did you pray for the most? I liked, okay, the biggest, probably the one that I liked the most was, I didn't pray for their conversion, but Taking Back Sunday. I don't know if they're not really pop punk, but if there was a pop punk band, uh, I don't even know. I didn't even listen to Blink 182 a lot. They were probably too, lyrically edgy for me. I kind of played it in the more melodic emo world. But Taking Back Sunday, The Used, those were bands I really listened to that were more edgy. Uh, let's see. Because they have better musician, better writer, performers in the old days, pre Pro Tools and pre Auto Tune. Are you talking about Hillsong, Jeremy? Maybe, yeah, like that space where digital recording was still pretty raw and it required a lot of musicianship before there were a lot of extra tools. But they've been using all that stuff even for 20 years. But I think I know what you're talking about. So much more. It's based in like the synthetic digital. Do you know what they use before Pro Tools? Professional musicians. Yeah. Thoughts on Jesus is king. Is this like the statement on Twitter when kind of Christian nationalists are talking? Oh no, Kanye. No, I'm not a huge hip hop guy. I've never really been. I know that Peugeot loves hip hop, or not loves hip hop, but he was really interested in Kanye's Christian phase. He's in kind of a I would say Kanye's Christian pole, as someone who's bipolar, he's in a big swing in some, kind of a different place right now. I hope he's a I hope him well. Mm, next, Moises, I don't know who that is, said he will shun you if you don't attend the conference next August, may or may not be true. I don't know who that is. Taking Back Sunday could convert and keep the band name the same. Yes, agreed. Uh, their later stuff, it's so funny. Speaking of Jeremy's point on Pro Tools, like bands like Fall Out Boy, their lead singer who has like this really interesting voice that kind of got copied for a couple of years by like who was that other band? I chimed in, haven't you people ever Panic at the Disco. Uh like the lead singer for Fall Out Boy, terrible voice, terrible singer, used a lot of tools, a lot of takes. There was an All American Rejects, terrible singer. Um Let's Taking Back Sunday, their vocalist, terrible. And it's amazing that they could get and fix some of their stuff. Okay, yes, I like the Fray a lot actually, and uh, Reliant K. I was a big Reliant K fan in like junior high back in their first two albums, junior high, high school. I played a song called Sadie Hawkins Dance at like our local Christian club in like 2001 or something. But yeah, I saw them live a few times. The Fray, really fun pop stuff. The piano pop. There's a band called Waking Ashland. They were very indie Christian rock band that. Anyways, they're fun questions. I don't know if they're fun for a lot of people. But yeah, that's me riffing on some of the music stuff. But yeah, let's see what else we got down here. So, let's see. So, yeah, what do y'all think PVK is doing in the in his conference at New Jersey? One thing I wanted to do, I've already kind of said this, but I wanted to this afternoon after this stream, I'll be releasing my second conversation with Graham Pardun, who was a featured speaker at the Northwest Estuary Conference, and he's had some he's had a few conversations back on Grail Country. We had a conversation way back, I think in May. Together, he reached out to me after being on a Paul Vanderklay Friday live stream with Joseph, who's in the chat here. And I don't really know. He said, I think I was picking up what you were putting down, and it's weird because I'm totally not in Orthodox world, but I've had at least a dozen podcasts with people very passionate about Christian Orthodoxy, or in his case, struggling through it. Yeah, McMo would be somebody you'd have to talk to about Kanye. Like he's hip hop world. I'm very much pop and rock. Which is also to that point, I've a conversation that I had with a guy named Matthew Hylam, who has the most streamed cover of Let It Be on YouTube by the Beatles. And he has an award-winning stock music, like the music that you hear at like the beginning of this show or whatever. Like he has a business where he makes stock music. And so and so well, I think they're both at the conference with Paul Vanderklay right now, so maybe that'll actually happen. But anyways, Matt Hylam, I'm having another conversation. I'm doing a series with creatives, and on a personal note, like I lost the identity of feeling creative a long time ago because I was covering songs by, as I was mentioning earlier, like Hillsong. I wasn't feeling like I was doing anything original or creative. I was just copying so much. And this journey over this last almost getting close to a year now, be a year in January of being on YouTube and doing all this, it's been a creative process. And so yeah, to this point, and yeah, we can talk about Rick in just but yeah, so I'm talking to other artists, kind of like Rick is doing. I'm talking to writers and Phlebas. I don't know if you remember, in January we were on a stream together. um, on Christian Golden's channel, and Matt C asked this question, like, who's gonna write the books? Who's gonna make the albums? Who's going to make the movies and all these kinds of things related from people downstream in this culture, this milieu, as my wife has been making fun of me for saying, like, downstream from, in the milieu of, like, all these words over and over again, from in this cultural thing. But it's because McMo doesn't like rock, and Rick Beato's a rocker. So it'd be interesting to know why he doesn't like it. I like Beato stuff, because it seems like, I mean, my perspective, he had a, I don't know if you would call it extremely successful music career, but he was kind of in the industry, and he's been this nexus of a guy that was connected enough in the industry to start getting people, getting like producers to talk on the internet, which, all these producers were mysterious people, puppet masters of these albums, rock and hip hop. And one of his most recent conversations was with Rick Rubin, who I didn't really know. Yes, Phoebus says it. I didn't really know who he was until he was on I think he was on CNN, because he had written this book, and that guy with the silver fox hair was interviewing him, and he's like, "Yeah, I don't really know how to run a soundboard. I'm not really musically talented," but he's like produced all these kind of seminal records off his label Def Jam, which I don't know if that's what you're talking about, CW, but Def Jam. I love rock. What are you talking about, Chief? I don't know. I just don't. Why I don't know. Give us the TLDR on why you don't like Beto's podcast in the comments here. But I think that he has called there. Paul may have highlighted a conversation he had with this other like music critic a few months back that was really interesting about culture, and I don't know. He's made just by nature of doing the thing, the Chris Williamson, just do the thing. He got on here and started talking, started doing some music stuff, started doing some different things, but he's kind of honed in on some podcasting, um, and so I don't know, I think he had just enough connection to the industry to find the guests that and create and become that nexus point for a certain niche of conversation that wasn't really happening on YouTube. And it was mainly, older folks like Gen X boomer folk that shaped so much of what we call classic rock and in the 90s, the music of the 90s. And so I would say that would make him interesting. Yes, and that was in that conversation, Matt C was trying to get us to work. So he did a stream on why he doesn't like Beato. So we won't make him talk about it here. Everyone go find that stream. Uh he's wrong a lot. Okay. He's kind of pop. I don't know. That's what I think. And I'm pretty pop. When he calls like music great or something, it's probably considered too mainstream or something. I don't know. And what's up, Matthew? So let's see. Something's interesting. My conversation that I had with Afriel, which was right after the Northwest Estuary Conference, he wasn't really, he came on to my Trump got shot at stream that I did, and what's interesting is in this format on the internet, talking and on screens and looking at people, there are certain times like I feel a connection to a person. I don't know how to I'm interested. I find them fascinating, or there's something interesting there. And so uh there are people, it's not like everyone I other people find other people more interesting. It's just the way it is. I just happen to keep trying to do this. And as food truck Emily kind of called me a try hard, I just embraced it. Yeah, I'm trying hard to do this. Um, and I had Afriel on, and it kind of struck something for Paul about the nature of estuary and this little corner of the internet. And so he really pumped it. Several videos he added that in. He also gave some love to my conversations with Steven D20. And he it's a really interesting conversation series I did with him about science and religion, and took me to the limits of my science for sure. And then we kind of landed more into the theological at the on the especially on the last one. And it's really interesting because he's also a relatively new Christian, but he has all this background in science, chemistry, and art related to his wine and spirits brewery, or whatever you would call it, distillery, up in New York, upstate New York. So back to the Rick Beato thing, bro. It's pop from 20 years ago, stuck in the 90s. I mean, he's a product of who he is. Um, and all that music though that Rick Rubin, like all his great stuff is from that time. I mean, so uh let's see what else we got here. So yeah, I was talking about Paul and that conversation with Afriel was interesting to him. Um, there were a few things I thought we could look at here. Let me see. Yeah. I want to highlight so this is another preview of something I'm trying to cook up right now uh for Christian Baxter, yours truly podcast, practicing the art of conversation craft is so I had this conversation with Joseph Lambrecht, and he was out here in the comments earlier. Um, it's out on my channel, and I encourage everyone to go listen to every conversation I've ever. Uh, let's see if I can get this on here. Yeah, sharing. I'm sharing here. Sharing is caring. On my channel here, adding to stage. What up? Yeah, recent conversation with Joseph over here. I've got it playing. Exploring orthodoxy, video games, and Zoomer aesthetics. Really fascinating peek into the Zoomer, and he implicated Paul Vanderklay in Gamergate as a joke. But what was interesting, because he had on Redeem Zoomer, who's in his early 20s and is kind of a product of this online video game culture, Reddit 4chan-ish type adjacent. Um, and as somebody who still plays video games and played a large part of my life, in a stream that I was on with Joseph, which is where some of these conversations are birthed from. I'm like on a screen with Matthew Parlato, or I'm on a screen with McMo, and I'm like, well, let's have a one-on-one conversation, because there's obviously a lot that could be said with 6 people in a conversation that's kind of hard. And so, uh, oh, I see. As we're breaking into the conversation, he hates the new stuff. Yeah, he does these kind of takedowns of Spotify top 10. I've watched those. Rick Beato will be like, what the hell is happening with music? And then he critiques it. I agree with some of the critique, but then I also think that, we are where we are today. And well, let's get his TLDR. The problem is, from the outside looking in, these guys look like wise sages, but from the inside looking out, they get credit for simply simplifying impossibly complex things, and it retards the actual art. I'd have to think about that for a second. So, but for all of you with bigger brains, let's see. That's okay. It's okay to be triggered. That's you and Flevis can go head to head on that, because he said, "Why is it the best?" I like Beato's podcast, but it's not like I don't feel so personally connected. Back to my conversation with Joseph Lambrecht. He, I was on a Friday live stream with Paul, and he said that I said something about how orthodoxy, there could be a segment of young people wanting to basically embody like the the physical structures that they see in games like Skyrim or Assassin's Creed, and I watched it back as I was preparing for my conversation with Joseph, and he kind of like leaned back, but he didn't engage with it, and then he brought that into our conversation, and we really so I'm interested. I've had a conversation with President Foxman, who does video game kind of commentary stuff as well, and I know Afriel, we mentioned it too, because the younger guys, like, their relationship to video games is different from say mine and Neil Daedalus or Slack Arias's a relationship to video games, and it's very fascinating because they were watching the Gen Xers stream and playing and seeing that as a model, but the Gen Xers just grew up playing by themselves, and then maybe millennials and Gen X, we started doing, some LAN parties and stuff, but not to the extent. And so, um, anyways, that was a interesting thing. So I'm trying to get together a roundtable of Zoomers to have a conversation with them about culture, and that's in the works. So I don't know. We got any more questions out there in the hive mind? Um, we've got some side conversation going on. McMo has gravity has pulled the attention, which is cool. Um, let's see what else I have here. I'll go ahead and talk about because Teo said, "Is Benjamin Boyce controversial?" And I mean, I felt like me getting on the internet to platform him. There are people that would think he is uh, controversial to say the least. And I found out, so this story arc between the guy who was called Martyr Made that was on Tucker Carlson that then got flack from trigonometry guys, like create dust up drama, and then Benjamin had Konstantin Kisin on to talk about this, what he's calling the woke right, and so I listened. So then apparently Martyr Made, the guy, he has a podcast or a show on YouTube that is kind of a deep dive on history. He doesn't consider himself a professional, but he just brings his perspective. He worked in the Department of Defense. And then he and Jocko Willink, who is a popular YouTube podcaster, bro, in the kind of Rogan sphere. He's a co-host with Willink on a podcast, and I thought that was really interesting because Willink's kind of seen as this, stoic, sensible person, and then to be this controversy now over in that space. Well, Benjamin had him on, and I watched his podcast, his premiere of it last night, and there was a section where the guy, I can't remember his name, Martyr Made, Daryl Cooper, he talked about identity. And in one of, there's all these histories more clear, 2020 is history. I can't even think of the phrase off the top of my head, but yeah, and to the point of controversy, here it is. He did a whole section on Jerusalem, this Martyr Made guy. Well, where he gets his name is from the guy who said, "Love your enemies," being killed and made a martyr. And it's that he referenced kind of that in his conversation with Benjamin on kind of a spiritual, religious level. And then, so does he talk about identity? So what I wanted to say about identity is, what I was getting to this point where Megan Basham's bashing book of what Shepherds for Sale, where she's critiquing a lot of big evangelicalism and and I think she even writes some critiques of Tim Keller in there and some big money and whatnot. But the controversy of Keller that you could come up with, if that's your biggest thing versus say something like Ravi Zacharias's legacy, then he's done a pretty good job as a human, and not only that, as a pastor. And I think that in one of his last interviews he gave was with Carey Nieuwhof. And if some of y'all were paying attention to Paul Vanderklay, you may not know who Carey Nieuwhof is, but he's kind of a podcaster for Big Eva guy. He interviews, big mega church pastors and church growth movement people. But he had on the one Paul gave treatment to was with John Mark Comer back, when I first started playing back in like February here. And I actually made a small video on my channel about it as well. But he interviewed one of Tim Keller's last interviews, probably 6 months before Tim Keller died. And Tim Keller said in that interview, he had done some writing, but he wasn't going to be able to finish another book. But he said, hindsight's 2020. Thank you, Teo. That um, his next book would have been on identity. And so, no, I don't know about that if that's the answer, but to my point on just identity is a huge issue in our culture, regardless of the more controversial takes that you were pointing to, but like sexual identity and such. And so, um, which one I don't know, and I don't know which clip you're talking about from where, you're, McMo, but he released uh, Benjamin Boyce released this clip, and that I just think where we're kind of at about identity is a huge deal because it's like identity politics. Um, so and it has a lot to do with individualism, but it also has a lot to do with tribalism. And um, anyways, I just think that was interesting. There's kind of an interesting breakdown. There was kind of and it's funny because it looks like in the polls, Trump's, leading, and it seems this was the other piece I wanted to talk about was this. What is mainstream now? When Elon Musk hosts uh, Trump on X, and there's, I don't know, millions of people tuned in, and millions and millions, and then there's presidential candidates, and even in the primaries, going on podcasts to get the most exposure, and to build up reach quickly versus just depending on mainstream media. And you see the people the younger people like Vance and JD and Vivek Ramaswamy, who are both millennial, like my age, 39, that they operate well in these long form settings and going deep into topics that they've probably done the kind of viral homework on YouTube and whatnot about, that being a much more interesting avenue for conversation. And how this, I made a video a long time ago this year called how 3-hour conversations change the world. And I think we're seeing it now be mainstreamed, as many of us in this corner have watched it for, over the better part of a decade. Um, and specifically, these video form on YouTube, where people are able to watch the relationality between the guests and the hosts. And I just think it's really, really fascinating what we're witnessing culturally with uh, podcasts doing what they're doing. So, uh, oh yeah, that was a great section, McMo, of the conversation with Boyce and Daryl Cooper, talking about small communities being able to govern themselves. And last night, Jordan Hall was on a Spaces conversation on X with, I don't know who was hosting, but they were using Brett Weinstein's name or account to kind of garner reach, because Brett wasn't really participating, but they were using it for reach, I think. Jordan Hall spoke on there, and he talked about, well, it just was heartening to hear him as a new Christian, basically, I don't know, share the good news on there in a certain way. And this, there was kind of a politicized conversation about how government deals with disaster related to, North Carolina and the Hurricane Helene and everything. Um, and what was interesting is that he gets on there. He says, I think everyone was just kind of like stroking Elon's ego, saying, "Oh, Starlink is the most amazing thing. Starlink's the most amazing thing." And then Jordan Hall gets on there. He's like, "I think that every church in America should get Starlink." He's like, because churches are in most of these towns, and even in cities, are still located in the middle of the town, which is very Pajovian point. And everyone kind of gave him like kind of a it was, and then the next guy was like some Trump campaign person that got on there and talked. And it was just, I could just sense like it was a different spirit that he was bringing to that conversation. And it wasn't the political animus. It was a spiritual animus. It was for, in his case, a Christian one. That question doesn't get asked. Why strong familial and cultural identities went away. I think it does get asked in certain conversations that I mean, I would say the disintegration. Um, why did they lose? Oh, um, because cities won, and this could even be a Tim Keller critique of his justification for city to city, and that cities as culture, like all this. He put a lot of emphasis on city in his ministry, um, and like the Jordan Hall arc of Civium and where he's gone was away from by city, like away from the metropolis, and hundreds of thousands of millions of people to thousands and tens of thousands of people being better. No, he did not talk to Elon, but it was on Spaces. And everyone was talking about Elon, about Starlink being so vital in the reconstruction and in the safety and the ability to communicate during the fallout from Helene, the Hurricane Helene in Western North Carolina and the surrounding areas. But to McMo's question here, I think it's a lot of things. There's people that point to the 60s, to the Lyndon B. Johnson stuff. You can get that kind of cultural aspect. There you could talk about the failing or the weakening of. I mean, I think it's easy to say now. Oh, America has always been a multicultural uh, country. We've always allowed the immigrants in. But what's interesting is, say all 90% of the immigrants were coming from Western Europe at one point. I'm making that number up, but a large portion. And even though they were different languages, they were different heritages, they were even different sects of Christianity, they were still Christian, they were still European, they were still, Western European, and there were these larger pockets of homogeneity, and Paul talks about, the Christian Reformed churches, and there was, I would say, things like postmodernism, well, scientifically within modernism, the atomization, the tearing apart. We're just individuals. We're only individuals. We're not connected relationally. There's nothing happening between me and another physical person. It's just me. And that makes family arbitrary, makes marriage arbitrary and just contractual, not spiritual. It makes family just a means to an end. If it's only genetic mimetic propagation, there's no, all these things. So, there, what is ultimate freedom, and something you could say like ultimate freedom is, if I could make all the choices I wanted without consequence, like, is that really, am I free or am I slave to something? And then there's this idea that there's more freedom in discipline than in utter and absolute freedom or something. I don't know. Was nationalism required? I don't know if that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm just saying, those things break down more slowly, uh, when there is certain forms of homogeneity. And uh, who was talking? I was watching a conversation earlier about, well, anyways, uh, will the farmers be comfortable in the New Jerusalem? Who knows? Who knows? All right. Well, I've gone a little bit here, and I think I've covered most of what I wanted to cover. Uh, we'll open it up like Paul Vanderklay does on a Friday and have some discussion and see where it goes. So I'll drop the link and we'll see what happens. This is such an unfortunate mischaracterization of individual and its deep roots in the existential thought. There will probably okay. There's there is a critique for whatever I'm making, but obviously CW saved the stream. Um, so uh, come come beat me up, CW. The thing about individualism is I think it was important for us to get down to that point, though. Like, I mean, I think that deconstruction probably is necessary to find all the to show us how more clearly the need for, you know, relational hierarchical realities, um, and to show us, you know, that struggle. Yay! Thanks, Branch. Late as usual, want to shout out CV's great charism in the TLC. But apparently it still it needs saving right now. I've got the link in here. The one thing I don't know how to get the link to post. Do I have to open up like YouTube live stream to get the link to post? I don't know how to pin it to the top of the chat. I don't know how to do that. But yeah, thank you, Branch. We got the full part done. I've it takes a lot of energy to promote the conversations. I haven't and then I feel bad that not every conversation gets um you know, the same like promotional treatment, because I just don't have the energy or the time to do that for everything. And I think like that there's an honest reality to like if there's somebody that's doing a work that's, you know, like that they've got something to promote other than simply the conversation. I do think that's interesting, and they're trying to do the digital work online, versus, you know, somebody that is looking for you know, the on ramp into conversation, um, that the lover of randos conversations are going to find interesting. They promote themselves and they do their own version of promotion through the support that TLC gives them. Um, you pin it on YouTube and not in StreamYard. So I got to figure out how to get into my back door on YouTube streaming right now because I honestly don't know how to do that, or I haven't been back there in a long time. Um, and so if people want to come on and do some conversation, I could so let's see here. What else we got over here? Postmodernism is late stage capitalism played out. You just on mobile, you press and hold. Oh, so if I go to the show on YouTube, if I find it, and let's see here, go to my channel, slowing way down here, guys. Someone's got to hop in. There it is. You got thoughts, Busatil?
Yeah, I was wondering your thoughts on pop punk. I want to go back to pop punk.
Okay.
Because I actually think that something very significant happened in
Yeah.
that. And I want to talk to people about it like an anthropologist, not through
Okay.
like a musical lens.
Gotcha.
And it's like, you know, Thomas Sowell's Black Rednecks, where it's like you could have Black culture be affected by the rednecks of the northern England, because those are the people who own slaves in the southern United States. So you don't think of those things as having this like direct relationship, but I think there is one with pop punk, and specifically that punk became pop, like that it was top 10, and then all of a sudden, like, because this is the thing I noticed, that color of Manic Panic, you know, the one that all the girls with the pixie cut had. They would have like a little bit of the purple or the teal. That became trans. Like everything that was pop punk when you and I were in high school became queer coded.
Yeah, well, I wore girl jeans because I wanted
Yeah.
before they purposely made them skinny. You know,
Yeah. The tight man pants. Yeah.
So
So there's
like,
this like weird overlap.
well, I think that also has to do with like scene, the scene kids, and which is interesting in the Grim Griff sort of way of being seen, but like, also being
Yeah,
a
yeah.
part of the scene. And yeah, so and again, this is a conversation about identity as well, trying to find an identity
Yeah.
and a group, to be a part of. And yeah, the emo scene, a lot cutting. Well, what's interesting is I was listening to someone
Yeah.
talk about social contagion, specifically mainly among young girls, but it may have been Peterson. I don't remember who was talking about it, but they mentioned cutting, and I went back and thought about that, because of scene kids, emo to scene kids was
Yeah.
that was a very trendy thing, and like, why does it? Um, oh man, like, well, why does it have to? uh, Why do these things go together? And yeah, I don't know. It's a subculture. It's not, pop. And you're saying like, well, how did this become popular? How did punk become popular?
Well, it's like there's these ideas which exist within punk of pushing gender norms, and then through someone like through pop punk, but also through just the aesthetics of punk. Like the song "Complicated," if you just listen to it by Avril Lavigne, has nothing to do with punk.
Yeah.
They like threw in a little bit of crunchy guitar into like Skater Boy and stuff, but some of the stuff, you're Ashley Simpson. If you remember Ashley Simpson,
Yeah, yeah, that
um,
one kind of in that vein as well.
this is so strange that I'm talking about this as like an anthropologist, but really, someone like Avril Lavigne makes that popular for everyone, right?
Well,
And
I made
her
the point.
look
I made the
was
point that
gender bending in and of itself. The tie and the dude's
yeah.
what undershirt, right?
Well, even you can trace that back to the 80s though, with like
Yeah,
glam rock, as being a part of and pushing gender stereotypes, people like Steven Tyler and as a
right.
big part of that with painted fingernails and necklaces and sashes
Yeah,
and whatnot. And like, so I think it's always been a part of it. But it's David Bowie, you know, um, there's always been something there. And like I said, even like who could get the deepest V-neck, and it has to do with like
yeah.
avant-garde, and it has to do with these things. We'll get Teo, do you have any thoughts on that? Or are you just listening in right now?
No,
Chad, you're in.
I've got zero thoughts on that. That's not my scene.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all right. Chad, do you have thoughts? Listening in.
Yeah, how's it going, guys? Good to see you.
Hey man.
I was just listening to some Bill Murray. I don't know if you all ever heard of Bill Murray.
Bill Murray, the actor?
Nope.
No.
So Bill Murray spelled with U-R-B, like Billmuri, something like that. Dude, it's wild. I think you'd get a kick out of it, actually. Being an artist, an artiste.
Artiste. I don't know. I
And
don't feel like much of an artiste, but
that breaks stereotypes.
yeah.
Hmm.
Like musical stereotypes.
Yeah, genre bending. It's crazy, dude. The guy is wicked talented. Obviously his name isn't Bill Murray.
Well, it's interesting when you say genre bending and gender bending. There's got to be some like some word play there as well. I don't know, David, on your point about the way that I saw it, which was a little bit different, was how sorority girls started listening to Dashboard Confessional and Death Cab for Cutie, and
That's right.
and they popularized, and then the dudes started listening because they're like, girls are listening to that, it's like, oh, all the people that liked Dashboard before, like he was a part of a kind of an indie Christian band called Further Seems Forever, the lead singer for Dashboard. All the people that were following that like trail, then there's all these like sorority girls come into shows that are into the music. And he's not super masculine. He's like a small framed 5'5", like, dude. So there's
Well,
like this interesting thing.
the scene in those days too, it was so funny because at the beginning of it, before there was pop punk and like Avril Lavigne, is the punk scene was just like a bunch of dudes and some of their girlfriends, where it's like that was it. It was very like there was considerably less women in the scene than there was dudes.
Yeah, and it was violent at times.
Yeah.
Even in like the Christian hardcore scene with bands like Zayo and Living Sacrifice and or the hardcore scene, there's like mosh pit was a dangerous place to be. Like they just are swinging arms and legs and punching. And
I even wonder if once it turned hardcore, there were so many prominent Christian hardcore bands, if the scene fell apart the same way the Roman Empire did. It just like became Christian and people were like, just fell apart from there.
Yeah.
Right? Like
yeah, it's possible. Like, you know, don't mosh too hard, you know, like that's the Tom Holland thesis of punk, of hardcore. Yeah, I don't know. The anthropologically looking at I think it's interesting, the idea of scenes, you know, this thing that Jordan Hall connected with another guy on the Scenius thesis of how they develop. And I mean, by the time punk, quote unquote, punk gets to Avril Lavigne, it had already been vulturized by the labels and all these things, you know, and even in the pop punk, the sense of bands like Good Charlotte or My Chemical Romance that were kind of, use another Jordan Hall word, like they were simulacrums of the actual, you know, they weren't the real thing. They weren't the heart of the real thing. They were like created to be like the real thing.
They were created to be like, they were created to be like Green Day. And by the time punk gets to Green Day, it's doing what you're saying. And then when what you're saying comes along, it's like, oh, look at how successful Green Day was. Let's tap that market.
Yep.
Well, and you at the exact same time, if you take something like Rage Against the Machine, right? Or if you're looking at other things like that, it's just like, is it rap rock that's about to come in around the same time? It's just like, what is the relationship between Rage Against the Machine and Limp Bizkit? Like there's a very strong relationship that I'm sure one of those Habs hates, that there is without a doubt a relationship between those two movements.
Well, that goes back to what the market did with the Monkees related to the Beatles, you know,
right.
and then where you have this thing that's this through line, or like, and I can't remember who the other big rock band of, because I'm so illiterate on some of this stuff because I was raised on Christian rock music, but is oh man, who's
Rolling Stones?
Yes, I can't get no satisfaction. That's exactly the point, Chad, is what is what we'll give them some love here in a second, McMo. But the Rolling Stones were this thread from blues to rock, and then off and actually, and so were the Beatles.
Zeppelin.
Yes, those were these guys. Where it seems, and I could be wrong because I wasn't there and I don't know, but it seems like that you have this connection to an authentic thread, to something true to form, that then, you know, gets photocopied, you know, and then it gets diluted and diminished. So we have some others. David had to go. Teo's making comments about how white this conversation is. I can't have much of a conversation on hip hop, or the more.
I mean, you're talking about the blues. I don't know why it's white.
I just clicked because McMo was correctly identifying the connection between Rage Against the Machine and Limp Bizkit.
That was David Busatil.
The VMAs.
No, it's POD.
Oh, POD, payable on death. They were the link between.
That's how you get there.
No,
Rap rock.
no.
No,
POD
you don't think so?
No, POD comes after Limp Bizkit.
They were a Christian Limp Bizkit. That's all it is. That's all that I loved POD. I learned how to one of the first songs I learned to play on guitar was
I
Southtown
love them too.
in drop D. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yep. God's register. Yep.
God's register.
Drop D.
Creed's, yeah. Well, I mean, you could extrapolate that onto Creed. There went Teo. There was enough. He's like, it's just too white. It's too white.
Well, it's obviously the same conversation in a way that you could have between pop and hip hop. Of, is it authentic if it becomes pop? I mean, and punk and hip hop. I mean, what is that trend in the West where we take things that are liminal and we put them in the center?
No. So
we do that.
Okay. So the Beatles. Okay,
Yeah.
hang on a second. So the Beatles were authentic. They were a point of authority. Okay. So then after the Beatles come along, I'm trying to think of like another artist that was similar. Whoever like tried to basically copy that sound, they then became sincere to the Beatles sound. So this is the distinction around the authenticity and sincerity trope. So the Beatles were authentic, and whatever came after them that copied them was sincere to the Beatles' authentism.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened with Led Zeppelin. They were very authentic. They started a whole genre that fans just basically stole, and they were very sincere to the Zeppelin rock sound. And they were the authority on that sound for years, and still in many ways are. I mean, you still have Zeppelin ideas being copied, whether that's kind of like the lore around Zeppelin, not just the sound, but like the lore and the whole that whole kind of bit there. Is that making sense to you guys?
Yeah, I like the distinction, the authentic, like who there. I would say something has to happen like culturally where somebody like grabs a hold of a spirit and it transcends the culture. And somebody like Elvis, like the Beatles, like they grab hold of a spirit, and maybe they're able to do it because at the time, because they're white, or whatever. And that's different now, I believe. But that they're able to, and then you have people that are authentically in the scene, authentically influenced by, and they make their own sincere versions of that art. And then from that, then you have something that's not sincere, something that's a bastardization of the market or something like that.
No, I think that they're still sincere to the market. They're very sincere to a formula.
Right, but not to the spirit of which it was born.
Right, because they don't. Yeah, right, because they don't have the kind of authority that like Zeppelin has. When I hear of like Coheed and Cambria, okay, they are one of my all-time favorite bands, and they had a very authentic sound, but they were also pulling from like the sceniest stuff that you're talking about, Fall Out Boy, stuff like this.
Yeah, they were emo. They were the emo scene for sure.
But they wouldn't. But if you looked close enough, they were nothing like it.
Yeah, they were conceptual artists. They made like long form novels to go with their comic. Yep. They made comics to go with their albums, and they were concept artists, definitely.
And they're still together, still making records that are very authentic. They are very I think they're kind of the epitome of that whole entire scene as it relates to authentic. It's kind of weird.
What do you guys do with So if the originators of a sound, they're authentic, and then they end up kind of creating a subgenre through their popularity.
I've got an
And-
answer for you.
Well, like how do you map that trend of like that originator almost becoming like their authenticity gets redefined by the market as sincerity, and then they themselves become derivative
Yes.
of the genre, and so they got to break out, and Led Zeppelin has to do like a folk album, and the Beatles have to, you know, struggle mightily to like surprise themselves even with their own sound over the years, and they to varying success. Most of the time they can't succeed.
Well, that's why they break up. That's why they,
Yep.
you know,
There you
like
go.
they're like when John Bonham dies,
Yep.
Zeppelin cannot sustain. They actually, this is kind of an opportunity for them to leave the market.
Here, I'll
Yeah.
give a shout. I'll give 2 points. One is a shout out to try to get to McMo some love, because I can't speak to hip hop because I don't know anything about the culture. Like I can only speak to the culture which I understand. And so here's what I do know. When I was listening to Rick Rubin talk to Rick Beato on the podcast that you think so poorly of, he talked about Aerosmith being at the end of their ability, of like they were almost done as being able to be successful within the culture. And then I probably won't even get this right, but Rick Rubin thought it would be a good idea for maybe Run DMC to use, I don't know who the band was, to use one of the tracks from Aerosmith to, and it completely revitalized. It did two things. It revitalized Aerosmith's career as a band, but it also legitimized a form of hip hop into the culture at the same time.
Yeah.
And so, but anyways, so I think that would be a point to where it's like these things feeding into themselves, and where do these things come from?
Well, I'm thinking about the, you know, like with like say.
I wanted to make one more point though. I wanted to make
Sure.
one more point on the Beatle, or what was the point that Matt you were talking about with
What that the authentic originators end up finding themselves stuck in this sincerity box that they didn't choose.
Okay, yeah,
They chose
so a genre that I do know well is the Christian modern worship, like where all that came from and how it all. So in 2007, Louis Giglio, who was the spirit leader for the Passion Conference movement, you know, that kind of peaked at having 60,000 college students show up in the mid-aughts, early aughts. The leaders for that, like, were coming out of Atlanta, and they were from North Point, Andy Stanley's North Point Church, and they were one of these early mega churches that had the resources to do live streamed audio video. In 2007, I could watch their college service, and they were probably like one of 2 or 3 that you could watch, and they had their band was, you know, in, and like, so
it was huge.
they had,
You
they
can't
had
even describe how paradigm changing that was.
They
Like,
had
it doesn't sound crazy.
They had worship leader profiles. So there was this guy named Christian Stanfield there, who is my age. There was another guy named Steve Fee, who had a falling out of ministry, and then there was an older guy. But I was really attracted to Christian Stanfield and Steve Fee's style, and on their worship leader profiles, they listed who their influences were, and they both listed Jimmy Eat World as their number one influence. And I was listening heavily to Jimmy Eat World. So then you have to ask the question, well, who is Jimmy? And Jimmy Eat World didn't even call themselves, they didn't even for a while know they were emo. They were just they were being authentic to whatever rock bands were influencing them. I don't know who, you know, YouTube.
Yeah, like late ska or something, whatever was immediately before that.
I mean, so
they were kind of on their own.
This is another thing. These bands never create the genre names. So you say emo or grunge or any of that. Nobody.
Right.
They're too ahead of it. Yeah.
But I'm trying to say is now, like, now that Christian Stanfield's 40, and you know, 20 years ago, that stuff was happening 20 years ago, had trying to find what is sincere and authentic for like, you know, versus him having this, he's the one that came out and they promoted him doing the new rendition of Jesus Paid It All, which is like, you know, he hasn't even, I don't know, got past that point of his career, but that was kind of a big deal for this rock and hymns and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. That's just an example of to your point of like, well, who was the, you know, who do these people trace their musical lineage back to? Teo, do you want to bring in like the conversation about hip hop and save us from our myopic views
Yeah,
of
help
the
us with some Kendrick takes.
Oh yeah, Salter. First, I just wanted to say I also felt bad when you sincerely responded to our trollish comments. Uh,
Yeah.
but to your point, Matt, I think you're right. It's a cycle in my brain of there's a authentic sound that after a while the people that were influenced by the authentic sound give their take on it, and the initial or originators want to be sincere to the authenticity that they founded and rebel against that, and that's
They
the
overthrow their own sound, don't they? They like revolt against it. It's wild.
Well, that's the authenticity move. Because like the sincerity and the authenticity doesn't even have to be in the actual sound of the music. It's also about, especially when you're talking about you know, performance or rock and roll. You're talking about an attitude, and so it's like the clothes they wear, it's the way they talk to the interviewer, it's the way that the video is shot, it's all of that stuff. It's not just the music. So an authentic move might be, we're done, we quit, you know.
I think this might be a bit too simplistic, but capitalism comes into this because there seems to be a point where you have to make sacrifices at the altar of mammon, and some things get chopped off and some things don't make it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm listening. Like I said, I was just listening to this band, Bill Murray, which is not. I don't think it's really a band. I think it's just two guys. One of the dudes is from the band Attack Attack, which I've heard the name, but I've never listened to. Now, when you listen to the music, it's really weird because it sounds like emo vocals, singing country hooks with metal breakdowns. And it's like, what? But it sounds awesome. So it's like this weird scrambling of authentic, sincerity, all that stuff kind of mashing up. And that's like totally an outgrowth of the internet culture that we're living in here. And I don't even know what to do with it because, like, you know, it's not marketable. Nobody knows who it is, but a small few really do. And is that a capitalism move there? You know what I mean? Is it like what do you do with that?
Well, I would say that's something like being, you know, being in a conversation space like TLC. The capitalism affords for the micro genres to exist. It doesn't necessarily mean that they'll rise to the top, you know, and ultimately be great capitalists, but it's bread for the masses or something, you know. I don't know, like.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I don't want to. My preference often tend to be the more, genre bending things on the fringes. However, I think it's important that there is a translation of what the genre brings to the world, to the masses, that aren't like nerds of the genre that want to listen to the deep cuts. Uh, I think pop is important. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah, I agree. I love pop. And for any songwriters out there, you think you want to take you want to kind of like try to whatever knock down pop? It's like You think it's easy to make a pop song? Go ahead. I'm waiting. Like, this music is very difficult to create, um, and it is good. I mean, because I think it's actually, you can't actually talk about any of this pop music without talking about hymns or the church. Like, this is all related, and
Yeah.
they're tapping into these what Rebecca would call psychotechnologies or whatever. But they're just, we love this stuff.
Well, and I think there's there's kind of a simple pattern that that people that can be, approached by the masses. And if you get outside that pattern, you find interesting variations that can pique your interest, but they are hard for the masses to be able to, everybody to latch onto, and so you see that like your, hymnody and modern Christian worship and even and in pop music in general, like, Taylor Swift and the like and whatnot. It's because it's not surprising. It's something that the beats everybody can get on board to, everybody can sway to, the lyrics are not overly complicated. Everyone can sing together at the bar when it gets to that great Garth Brooks hook, those types of things. Or when that beat drops, like, what is it? Bump, 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 bump.
I think it's probably a very Western thing for us to even do, where we have to excuse or explain or justify pop. Almost like we have an anxiety. Like, don't worry, it's still cool. Yeah.
I embrace
I don't
it.
think these categories, we invented both the categories. So we have trouble. We always have to explain it. But I feel like outside of the modern West, you don't have to. Of course, I mean, everywhere is the modern West now. So,
Parsons, what have you got, man?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we got.
Oh, I was just sorry. I got road noise probably, but I was going to say, like, you have that sound, that initial sound of any group. I mean, rap, whatever. I mean, that starving artist. You know what I'm saying? And they make that sound out of coming up, whatever sounds around them, and that struggle. But the problem is, once that gets co-opted by whatever money or influence, it's very hard for an artist to recreate what that initial sound, that they found, or like you're saying, the spirit of that culture or whatever it is. I was just going to say, for the black, like, rap artists, like, that's in. It seems like rap, they make a way for like a whole genre in, like, for American rap. Like, you have like Outkast and the Dungeon Family, and they created a whole avenue for Atlanta rap music, Southern rap music. You have like New York and then the West Coast and all that stuff. They make a whole, and so then you have like these tribes forming that they're all going up against each other. Where rock music, it seems like everybody gets more tuned into a sound that is like across the whole board, and then it turns into pop music almost, and then it's like, like Metallica or something, everybody tries to sound like them for a while. But I'll stop with that. So.
Yeah.
No, that's very interesting.
No, go on, David. You just came back.
No one has brought up the term poser that the punk scene found so important to have a term. Like, now where you like it, I think that it's in whatever the punk influence of modern culture is. I think this is one of the things, is punk was always concerned with the people that could take on the aesthetics of the movement without actually being invested or interested.
And that's my question. Did punk influence rap that way? That now rap, if you try to copy somebody's style, you will be cast out if you sound like them at all. You know what I'm saying? That's where rap kind of takes on that punk familiar.
This is where this past summer in rap comes into it, because that was the accusation of Kendrick to Drake, that he's a poser. They're Not Like Us was the #1 song, and that was him saying you're a poser, and also.
And I'll tell you straight up, I'm from Toronto, or I spent some time in Toronto. There's no real ghetto there. There is so much of a taking on a culture which is not our culture in what Drake is doing, right?
Yeah, but this is what goes back to the sincerity thing. So to be a poser is to be in sincerity mode. So like now, like so that was the big problem that people had with Metallica is like, oh, once the Black Album came out, now my little sister, she loves, Enter Sandman or whatever, and it's like, and now everybody's a poser because they like Metallica, but it's like, no, you're just being sincere to something
Good
else,
point.
like something that you can identify with. And I think where people get really upset or worried about with the pop is that somebody will, steal that authentic, sincere. Because I think authenticity and sincerity, they do go together. They should stick together.
Well,
but when someone steals it, it like becomes the concern.
I think
and
posers.
This even become.
I think posers more profilicity than it's a profilicity move.
Oh,
and
yeah. Nice.
I think it's different to the, because you can be I don't know any bands, but for Kanye compared to Outkast, for example, it's a very sincere interpretation of the influence of Outkast, but also a change from what Outkast were doing, and that's different to Lil Pump, who's just a poser. That's a pure profilicity, taking the lowest common denominator of the genre. And
it's funny because this actually even becomes a joke within the punk movement. So I had a friend and he had a shirt, and the shirt had Che Guevara's face on it, and underneath it said, "I have no idea who this is." Right? Which within the punk movement was hilarious because there were so many people with that shirt. So you had people where, I heard about this, I care about this movement, but you could also just wear it as a shirt until you wore it as a joke. I walked up to that guy and I said, "You don't know who that is? That's the lead singer to Rage Against the Machine." Right? That's what I said to him as a joke, really, which he thought was funny because, like, people really didn't know and would associate these things. The other anthropological bit is that this was also the entrance of communism. I think all the commies in 2001 were in the punk scene. All of the anarchists were, all of the gender bending, all of like everything, the white nationalists, those were also like the skinhead punks, right? Like, everything that we're dealing with right now used to be punk.
And now it's mainstream I mean, to look at the college protesters and be like, that's cute, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or, let them have their fun because, we live the real thing, or, they're getting a good taste or something like that. I don't know. I think that's an interesting point. Yeah, well, to bring it into this space, like, so am I a PVK poser today? Am I, like, am I posing authenticity and,
No, you're popularizing it. Pop is important.
Popularizing. So yeah, even though go ahead.
I said this is to how we understand PVK. Is that I said it's the Gino A. Marcus because that was the venue for like small punk bands when I in Windsor, Ontario, where I grew up. So I would say that you're like one of the people who sees a band playing and then says to a bunch of your friends, "We're going to start a band."
Yep.
And they go, "Well, what are our influences?" And you go, "I don't know, that band we saw on Friday." That's all I got, right? And then you become a band.
Yeah. I've made a few of those myself, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Interesting. You're as self-conscious as a poser. Don't want to, whatever. Well, I think it's also too like coming into a space kind of cold. Like you don't like there are rules you don't know, and there are cultural signs and tells you don't know that you're gonna either fumble your way through, or you're gonna get it's not gonna work or not gonna fit or whatever. But
Well, the thing is, Christian, is like you wouldn't be here. People wouldn't pay attention. They would stop paying attention.
yeah.
So, like I think if people aren't paying attention, then yeah, I mean, this is such a really small subset of people.
Yep.
And so, I mean, if you're a poser, then I'm a poser. The only authentic one here is Grim Grizz.
Obviously, no. Grim Grizz is very punk. He's not pop punk. He's punk. Chad is obviously one of those mask bands. So you're either Guar or you're what's it called? Slipknot. Yeah. Oh yeah, Sleep Token. Yeah, you were doing the mask before they were.
Well, they saw Chad doing it, so they had to.
Yeah. Inspiration.
Man. Well, I mean, it's been interesting. Last time I did a stream last weekend, it kind of we hit on music and culture more heavily in the church with McMo and stuff. But like, I mean, Paul, he was kind of pointing at that, and that's obvious. There is something I can help provide. Something, only one perspective on it, Teo. Only one shade of the musical spectrum, but like,
I feel
this
so
is
bad.
kind of making me. Yeah, go.
So serious.
Oh man,
This is kind of making me laugh though. This idea of like the new Jordan Peterson video is like an album dropping, where it's like we all have to listen to it because it's gonna have so many influence, and it's just like it's like a new album by whoever.
Oh, I would say like his Lex Friedman one was kind of like that. He kind of got back to some of the roots, some of the good old roots of, and with finally integrating some of his newer stuff in a way that was more cohesive and less chaotic.
Yeah, but we want that Freebird. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me some hierarchy, for God's sake.
Yeah. Has Jordan Peterson have to redefine himself in order to maintain his authenticity? Has he had the genre around him enclose upon
Oh my God,
genre?
Matt, this is what happens when you went with Daily Wire. It was when the punk band signs with a major label.
Yep.
It was just like, I don't know. Did they sell out? Like even the
He
term
didn't sell
selling
out. He bought in.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
think he's
that's
had the revolutionary, authentic turn. I think you're right. I think he just signed with the major. I mean, we just still have the major label Jordan Peterson still.
Well,
that's right.
I mean, that's what McMo was saying. He's still trying to craft something that's individual as well.
Right. He's starting his own label. Just like the punk, like where they'll be like, no, we're doing Fat Mike Records. That's what we're doing.
And that always
Like,
fails, by the way.
Yeah.
It always what?
Fails.
Yeah. I feel like that's funded by the mainstream still. I don't know. It doesn't feel.
I mean,
it
just kind of depends. There's two ways to look at. I think the jury is still out. I think, but it's still new.
Yeah, it's early.
But there are people that will only buy the 6th album. That will never buy the first album, and there are people that will only pay attention once you get on MTV, and the jury's out on how mainstream Peterson actually is. Like,
yeah,
8,000.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean 8,000 subs is 8 million subs is still not, PewDiePie numbers or whatever, or like, so I don't know.
I think this could be the best model to lay this up against is Metallica's career, actually. This would be a good one. Okay. By the time the Black album comes out, which is the that's the fifth record. They hit Moscow. They did the live show at Moscow, which had 1 million people. They say there's upwards of 1 million people at that show. It was a free show. So that's at that point, that was like the peak. That was like peak Metallica.
Yeah.
And at that point, that marker can be when Peterson, I think, was right around maybe coming out of his sickness.
His second book tour.
Yes. So now he's in his reload days, which everybody said Metallica were sellouts. They cut their hair. It's like, what are you doing? Why are you commercializing your sound? What happened to Lars's kick drum? Why is your hair cut? All this stuff.
Yep.
So let's just hope that they don't go into that Peterson doesn't go into some kind of monster phase, which will be horrendous.
Oh my God, guys, he went to rehab. Like it is a punk band.
Had to deal with his drug problem.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he had to deal with his drug problem. He got signed to a major label.
Yeah. Well, this is all, this is that kind of.
I think one of the thing that makes the cycle repetitive in an almost demonic way is the fact that the punk is trying to be mainstream. The mainstream, the mammonization of what is mainstream means that once anything gets a bit of traction, it gets dragged into the center.
Well, that's so good. There's this the punk rock MBA. I don't know if I'm Christian Baxter should listen to that if no one else does.
I watched a few.
He has this whole thing about punk, about how it's a movement destined for failure because of the idea that you can't be successful. Success was actually considered failure.
Yes.
Because if you got picked up, then everyone would hate you the moment you were popular. So you can't become popular.
Yeah. So Green Day, are they punk?
Yeah.
Parsons,
he did an excellent.
Yeah, go ahead.
He has an excellent video on Green Day because Green Day comes from the do it yourself stuff. And they tried a bunch to support the people that they came up with, but then all of those people were like, no, we have to hate you. Like, you're way too popular to be liked.
Yeah, well, then there's Nirvana. And a lot of folks hated Nirvana from their scene. They were like, these guys suck.
Yeah.
Like, these guys are just so bad. And somehow, one of the worst bands in the entire scene becomes one of the biggest staples of the scene.
That's because they were tapped into that pattern. Smells Like Teen Spirit's a pop song.
Yes.
So, what were you going to say, Parsons?
No, I mean, just talking about the punk and that's the other thing is when you become so popular. I mean, Peterson, people go to him, but they want to hear the old Peterson, but he's trying out new things, and you're like, what the hell? We came for the old Peterson, but that's the same thing with you go to your favorite group, they don't play the hits. You're like, man, I didn't get to hear the hit, but they're trying out some new things. But you're like, well, the new stuff, it doesn't have that spirit you once had. I mean, that's Nirvana, like you're saying, some people hated them, but it's they're testing something, and it's going to create a whole genre. And people that are musically talented are like, oh, this is something new here. This is something unseen. But most people that were in, what is it, the makeup and long hair rock music were like, what the hell? We're used to women and all this stuff. You know what I'm saying? But it starts a whole new, Kurt Cobain, he was singing he sounded like a country singer at the time, with that raspy, voice. And it's it's just, these so many streams come together at one time, and if you don't have the ears to hear it or eyes to see, then you're like, you miss it. But eventually, like 10 years down the road, you're like, oh shit, that was huge. Wow, like I didn't see that Nirvana, but now I'm like, I listen to Nirvana all the time because I'm like, well, that my childhood was tied up in that in high school. You know what I'm saying? And it's a part of me now. I can't escape it. But that's just some idea.
And the like attached to that idea, imagine a world where Kurt Cobain doesn't kill himself. Then what happens to him? He would be a guest judge on American Idol. Like,
Right.
think about that, right?
No,
like,
that was a family
giving advice.
Yeah,
But now he's legendary. He's legendary. Yeah, he's Jim Morrison. He's all these things. He's legendary for all time. And now we've idolized him. Now we've made him a mythological figure. You see what I'm saying? It's almost like the star has to die to become this mythological. Biggie Smalls, Tupac. They make rap what it is. They're weighed. All rappers are weighed against them to some degree. You know what I'm saying? Because of these mythological icons.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Or you could be Andre 3000 and just walk away.
Yeah.
Just say,
He didn't walk away. He's playing excellent flute music, all right? He is the greatest flautist of our generation.
I can't believe, Andre 3000. Come on, he became an actor. He tried and failed to be an actor. That's what he did. He went more mainstream than most of them.
Yeah, well, but I think the thing though is when you ascend,
Most Def.
when you ascend,
Most stuff is,
wherever you're at, if you ascend, the options at the top are limited. There, and of what do I do now? And so few people get there that it's easy to judge from the bottom what they should do. But the decisions are complicated at that point. And then the thing that makes you great, it's like that sophomore record slump or whatever. You have your whole life maybe to get you to that point, however young or old you are. And then you have to, well, now what, and I'm trying to synthesize new ideas, and I'm having to do it publicly instead of privately. And it's a messy process, and so it's easy to be hard on at the
this
top.
might be a good time for a shout out to Justin Wells' channel, because his story model is got the hero's journey. You climb the mountain of success, and then after that you could either have a tragic story, or you go on a quest that could end either in tragedy, or you then try to climb the mountain of legacy.
Yep.
But most people don't make that. They fold out the tragedy route. And
Right.
I think
It's
that
like-
applies to the life journey of a genre as well.
I wonder about with some of that punk, it was designed for 17-year-olds, right? Like it had something in common with like the music that young kids listen to. You can't mature. You can't be 47 playing that song, right? Like a lot of that music doesn't translate. And I wonder about what it's going to look like as all those young men that apparently like listen to Peterson, what happens when they get older. They're going to show up to something where he's helping out dudes in their 50s, and there's just a guy in like the front row of him talking, shouting out, "Do Rule 4," right? like, we're not there anymore. We're somewhere else. We're no longer, your room should already be clean. What now?
Yeah,
That is interesting because Andre 3000, it's not like he can't put out a rap record and that people won't buy it like crazy.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. So he's still like, nope, authenticity all the way, bitch.
Well, it's an interesting question, and it's one that I'm interested in asking the people that are closer to 17, trying to have a conversation with a few of those folks to see, like from their perspective, they see Peterson as a character within the manosphere, not a progenitor of, and such. And so, guys, I'm going to have to wrap this thing up. I don't know if anyone has any kind of closing ideas or anything they were wanting to get out before we kind of shut the stream down today.
I've wanted to have this conversation for years. Thank you. the anthropology of punk rock. So yeah,
dude. I mean, there's a lot of crossover. And I think, just and to be a part of something similar, like, to watching a scene develop in real time in your closer to your 40s is kind of an odd thing to happen, but here we are. So
me and Brett Weinstein were listening to a Fugazi album, and we thought we should try it ourselves.
That's right.
Well, thank you for the conversation, guys.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
That's
it was
been
lovely.
fascinating.
Thank you, everybody in the
Thanks.
Hive Mind.
Thanks.
For enjoying my ramblings. But the question and answer time was fun to get some rapid fire in the front end of this stream. So thank you all for that and everyone who came on. So with that, I'm gonna knock some people out and we'll close this thing down. So yeah, man. Thanks everybody.
Bye.